Good day, my future economists. We are back with another interesting topic, and today we are revising the business cycle. We will be using a past paper from November 2018, section C, question 5. Right. So I just want to remind you that when we have an economics essay, we have two sections. We have the 26 mark, which is the main part. Then we also have the introduction, which is worth 2 marks, and we have an additional part worth 10 marks. We will go into that a bit later. In the introduction, remember, it is not like English or other literature related subjects where you are creative and you are playing with words. We want the facts. So, for instance, I want to show you here the introduction that I created. So, this is question 5, and it wants you to discuss the different phases of the business cycle. So, what you can do is simply define the topic. You can just simply say, business cycles indicate fluctuations in economic activity, reflecting upswings of growth and downswings when there is economic decline or negative growth. That's it. You don't have to say, it was a sunny day when this was happening. You just define the topic and you're done with your intro. 2 marks, done. Right. So as you can remember, we have 4 phases of the business cycle. 4. We have prosperity, we have boom, we have our trough or recession, and then we have our recovery. Those are the 4 phases. Let's go through them again. We have the recession, the recovery, the trough, and prosperity, where everything is great. So now we want to look at what is a full business cycle. A full business cycle is the distance from peak to peak. And the peak is the highest point of the business cycle. It can take many years to get from one peak to another. It can take a couple of months if there is an economic shock, like a global pandemic, like a natural disaster. It differs. There is no set period of time which we can say it takes to reach a full business cycle. We also have 2 axes. We have the y-axis, and that is facing that way. We also have our horizontal axis or the x-axis. The y-axis represents level of business activity, while the x-axis represents the number of years or the time that it takes to move from one cycle to another. Now we will discuss the phases of the cycle themselves. You want to remember that we have a recession. And with a recession, this is when we are getting signs that the economy is underperforming. So there is a general downswing. Things are just not great. There is a general downswing in economic activity. And what do we mean by that? We mean there is a slowdown or a decline in all economic activity. This is to say there is an increase in unemployment. The number of people who do not work goes high. That's the first thing. Secondly, businesses will start to produce less and less of their goods and services, decreased productivity. That means the GDP is going down, the GDP is decreasing. Also, we have export levels decreasing. This means in our GDP calculation, the X minus M, which is the net import, it goes down. We also have decreased consumption by households. And this is just referring to the consumption that me and you do. So we will buy less of products and we'll buy the things that we really, really need because our money doesn't stretch that far. You might find that there's an increase in fuel prices, in food prices, in car prices, and we want to prioritize what comes first. There's also an increase in inflation. And as I just mentioned, you will find that fuel prices are increasing, food prices are increasing, and the cost of living is too high. It exceeds the salaries and wages we earn as households. Furthermore, interest rates increase, which means that it becomes expensive for households to borrow from banks. And lastly, spending on capital equipment or investment spending by firms will also go down. That is the first phase, and that is the recession. Just remember, it is the first stage that shows us that the economy is underperforming. Right. And as you can see here, in our recession, unemployment is high, consumer purchases fall off, right? and businesses go bankrupt. A lot of businesses will shut down or they will significantly decrease the number of people that they employ. We also have people losing their household income because they don't have jobs or salaries and wages decrease, or inflation makes the wages decrease in value. We also have young people being unable to get a good job after graduation. As we said, unemployment levels will be very, very high during a recession. And now we will go to phase two, and that is an economic depression. In an economic depression, things go from bad to worse. All the factors we just spoke about, unemployment, households spending more and more on their essentials, people losing their jobs, all of these factors are worsened in a depression. Things just become worse. As you can see here, a depression needs to be characterized by 3 or more years of GDP contraction. So we can't say we are in a depression if we've only experienced high levels of unemployment for 1 year, because things might change the next year. But however, if for a year, then next year, then the year after, we have been experiencing decreases in unemployment, increases in inflation, and all of that, then we know that we are in a depression. And also, this takes me back to our recession point. When we talk about recession, we must remember that it is 3 quarters. So if things are going badly in 3 consecutive quarters, right? So for 3/4 of a year, we have unemployment which is high, we have inflation increasing, then we can say we are in a depression. Contrary to that, in a depression, it is 3 years and not 3 quarters. I hope you will remember that. Now we want to discuss the points we will write in our essay about a depression. Firstly, we said that from a depression, things are worsening. So we are coming from a recession space where unemployment is increasing, inflation is rising, but in a depression, it is worsening, it is intensifying, things are really, really terrible. Economic downturn is at its lowest. Right. So there is even more unemployment. Businesses do not make enough money, so it means that they will shut down or they will significantly decrease the number of people that they employ. We also have consumption by households decreasing significantly. And these are the words we are looking for when we are marking things such as worsening, significantly decreasing. These are the words that will show the marker that you understand that a depression is very different from a recession. We also have a further decline in the price of production factors, such as the natural resources we use in production. We also have an extensive depletion of national income, which means our GDP goes down to the drain. Our GDP is at its lowest, it's underperforming. We also have just a bleak outlook about the future. People are not excited about what the future holds, and most of them move out of the country if they can. They go and pursue greener economic pastures. Also, eventually, the economy will reach a trough. And I want to go back to our image here, where the trough is the lowest point of the business cycle, where things just progressed from slowly recession up until the worst point, which is the trough or the depression. Right. And as you can see then, we are also reminded about what happened in the late 1920s to the late 1930s, where there was a world recession, a global depression, in fact, where from even developed countries were suffering from the factors that we just discussed. After that, there's always a saying that says there is a light at the end of the tunnel, I think. So you'll remember that even with economic conditions, however bad they might be, most of the time, countries or economies that suffer from a depression will recover one day. So then we have our third phase, which is the recovery phase. Here, the recovery phase of the business cycle, it follows a recession and a depression, and this is where the economy regains and exceeds peak employment. So finally, things are looking up. And here we look at things such as employment increasing, things such as inflation decreasing, interest rates decreasing, so households and businesses can borrow from the banks. So businesses start to hire people. As a result, unemployment will decrease. We also have economic activity increasing. So those are the kinds of words that we're looking for in the recovery phase. We want increasing, we want recovery, we want positivity, and you must embody this in how you write out the different points. So you can see that, so as the marker, we can see that you understand the difference. There is also just an environment of hope and optimism in the country. So people are just generally happy during this time. There's a lot of optimism. Graduates are getting employment. Businesses are hiring more and more people. Things are stabilizing. And then there's just an example where we are looking at the period between when President Jacob Zuma in South Africa was outed as the president. And during that time, there was a lot of economic downturn, and the economy of South Africa was not performing well. Even the JSE indexes were really bad. However, when President Cyril Ramaphosa was then instated, immediately there was this positivity and optimism in the country. And even through the JSE, we could see that there are some increases in a lot of the factors that indicate whether the country has a positive future or a positive outlook. So there are a lot of things that can affect the recovery and depression of a country. Can be political factors, can be environmental factors, can even be things like a global pandemic, an earthquake, a tsunami. All of these can just shake the economy, and then we find ourselves in a recession, a depression, or even a recovery. We then also have our fourth phase of the economy. And as you can see with our very happy gentleman over here, this is a very optimistic time. We are at the highest, we are at the top of the mountain when it comes to economic activity. Employment is at its highest, unemployment is at its lowest, inflation is controllable by the government, taxes are low, just households and businesses are thriving. So there's a lot of positivity and just economic activity during a peak. So we want to always remember that the first thing we will do is define what the phase means. And the phase of the peak is the highest point in our business cycle. I'll take you back to our illustration over here. So the boom is the prosperity. You must also remember that there's synonyms. If we're talking about a boom and a peak is the same thing, and prosperity. If we're talking about a trough and recession and depression, these are also quite interchangeable. So you must remember also the different words you can use to just interchange during your essay. Right. So we see a lot of expansion and growth in the peak. We see GDP, employment, and revenue going up. So there are a lot of increases. We see also GDP going up. We also see optimism, positivity, hope for the future. People are regaining employment, so unemployment is low or at its lowest. Interest rates, prices, wages, and profits increase. And as well, markets such as property are also going up because people can now afford durable goods like houses and cars and so on. So these are our different phases of the business cycle. And you must remember that if you're writing about them, they must be out of 26 marks. Write at least 5 points at the very most in each phase, and that will constitute 26 marks. All the best.